So in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about connections. So we've already done constraints. There's other ways to connect things. Okay, so I'm going to take my cube and my sphere, and I'm going to just freeze the transformations on both of them. Okay, so there's a window under General Editors called the Connection Editor. And I'm going to Control-Shift-Click, add that to my shelf here. Okay, and so with the Connection Editor, we can bring this up, and we can select the cube. And so what I'll do here is reload left. And so this loads all of the attributes of the cube in the left-hand side of the Connection Editor. And then if we grab the sphere, and we can say reload right. So now we've got the cube and the sphere, and then it's generally in the left to right, like the left will be driving the right. So what I could do is come down here and I could find the translate, and so I could click on the translate on the cube and then find the translate on the sphere. So I can find the translate of the cube and then connect that to the translate of the sphere. So then if I were to come in and move the cube, the sphere is going to move along with it. Now I can break this down so that, for instance, that maybe the translate X of the cube controls the, let's say the translate Z of the cube controls the translate Y of the sphere. Okay, so we do this, and that's going to go. You know, and I already had just the general translate selected, so let's unclick that. Okay, and then just go to translate X, and then translate Y is selected here. Translate Z rather. Okay, so I'm going to bring up the Connection Editor. So the way this works is I select on one element, reload left, select on another element, reload right. what happens is it moves from left to right, so attribute of one is going to connect to the other and essentially be driving it. So for instance, let's find translate here on the cube. So we can expand it. And I'm going to say translate Z over here. I'm going to find translate for the sphere, and then let's say translate Y. So I can translate Z of the cube to the Y of the sphere. So then if I move the one, the other's going to move. And again, this magenta color indicates that this one's being moved left to right. And if you click on a sphere, you can see this yellow right here, so this means that there's a connection on it. Okay, and I could also wire up the translate X to the rotate Y. Okay, so translate X, rotate Y. And that's just going to be units as opposed to degrees. Okay, so the connection editor is one way you can connect things. There's other things used for connections, and nowadays it's probably sort of cooler to use the node editor, so I'll show you that. So I'm going to come here, right click, break the connections. So that's going to work with connections and keyframes as well. And I'm going to take them both and reset them both. Okay, so under here we're going to go to the node editor. And the node editor is going to show up kind of more of the interface if you go to Windows, Workspaces, Rigging, and then the node editor is here by default. Now the node editor is very cool. We'll get into this in more detail later. And it's just a brief introduction. So here's the cube. And the way to add something to the node editor is you can just click here on the, that's the add button. And so it's going to add the cube in. Now, the cube has a shape and it has a transform. We're not going to worry so much about the shape node. We're just going to worry about the transform for now. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with a sphere, and I come over here to the sphere and I can just middle mouse drag it in as well. That's another way of adding it. Again, we're just going to look at the transforms and not the shape nodes, and I'm going to get into that more in a scripting video. Okay, so I just want these elements here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select them, and then I'm going to come to Edit, Pin. Okay. So now if they're pinned, they're going to stay here. Now if I come to this button here, that's going to clear everything. So it's going to clear everything that's not pinned, rather. Okay, so this is clear, and this is add, and then you got to come over here to pin to actually pin something. If you click on this, this is going to give you a list of things that you might want to do in the node editor, and typically the things that you're going to do you're going to work with utility nodes. So I'm going to click on utility, and these are different nodes that you can use. Okay, so right now what I'm going to do And we're going to get into this in detail later. So also you see that there's this kind of a stacked menu right here. And so what you can do is, I'm going to select them both, and you can keep clicking and it's going to expand more options for you, or you can just grab them both. Okay. And so here in the node editor, it's going to give you everything that the connection editor had, but it's just a little more modern way of looking at things. It's a little more like some of the other packages like Unreal you might be looking at. So for the same thing, let's say if we want to take the translate of Z for the cube, and we can plug it into the rotate Y, the sphere. So let's translate Z and plug it into rotate Y. Now when you do that, you're going to get this little unit conversion thing here. And for the most part, you can just ignore that. Just don't even worry about it. But if we click on the cube, you can see the sphere is magenta. So translate X. Is making the sphere rotate. Now what I had done is reset their centers here, so let's see if I can back to my rig thing. Let's see if I can center the pivot and center the pivot. Okay. So now translate X, it's going to rotate that in Y. But you'll see that that distance is really, or the rotation, I mean, it's really, you know, the angles are really slow rotating compared to translating the cube. If we zoomed out a lot, the rotation is going to be a little faster. So I'm going to just show you one node that will maybe change things like that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is right-click, or I just grab the arrow itself here, and I can just delete that to disconnect them. So I'm going to have one node. It's the only node I'm going to get into now, but then hopefully this will show you why the node editor is cool. So I'm going to use the multiply divide node. I'm going to click on that. And then with the multiply divide node, I'm going to expand it. Now the way to understand a multiply or one of these nodes, you select it, and then you need to look over here into the channel box to see what's going on with it. And sometimes you might want to look at the attribute editor as well. So Control A will open up the attribute editor. And I'm just going to dock that over there. The attribute editor actually gives a little better view of what's going on with the multiply divide node. So essentially, you can have two inputs. Okay, and so these inputs are X, Y, and Z. It's a 3 value vector. It could also represent RGB for red, green, and blue for colors. Essentially, it's just going to allow you to multiply some values. So what we're going to do is let's take the translate Z again from the cube, and let's put it into input 1x. Okay, so this is a value that's incoming. It's this yellow value, so it's coming in from something else. And then with the second value, what we got to do is determine what that's going to be. So I can multiply it by 10. And so then I can take the output, and I'll take the output of X because I'm just working on X right now. And I will put that into rotate Y. And again, I get this unit conversion thing. Just don't even worry about that. Okay, so now if I move this in X, we can now see that that sphere is rotating a little quicker. Or we make it even quicker still. Let's make that that value times 50. Okay, so then if I move this at X, now that's going to rotate much more quickly in Y. So go back to the channel box. A value of 1. Sorry, Z. I was saying X. So moving at a value of Z, 1 unit. Then I can come over to the sphere and it should be 50. There it is, roughly 50. So that's made possible with the multiply divide node. Any channel you can plug into another channel, and you can multiply it or divide it. And so again, so we can see in the channel box we've got this input coming in, and then input right here that's timesing it by 50. But if we come over to the attribute editor, and that's also this blue icon up here. So got our channel box, attribute editor. So right now it's on multiply. We could also put it to divide. So we could divide it by 2. And then this is going to move really slow. It's barely moving at all. Or we could divide it by 0.5, same thing. Well, it's not the same thing. We can set the value to 0.5. Set it to 0.1. So we got to use math to play around with how these work out. And we're going to get into some of the more complex nodes down the road. So here are ways to connect things.